Started here. All right. So hopefully everyone found working with text in After Effects good. Yeah? Pretty entertaining. It's a pretty powerful system when you start really looking underneath the hood. This week we're going to change gears a little bit and look at a new, well, not necessarily a new system, but a new feature inside the tool set that will allow us to create some really, really interesting things. And I've gone ahead and already posted this week's content on the blogs. I apologize, some of the hyperlinks to the images have gotten broken, but all the content's there. Let's just take a look-see at it. Working with shape layers. So our conversation today is going to revolve around making shape layers. And shape layers in After Effects are amazing. They're really an extraordinarily powerful tool. Over the last couple weeks, both in our lab and in our homework, you guys have been focusing a lot on importing assets into After Effects and animating them and doing a number of some really great things. This week, however, we're going to focus on generating stuff in After Effects, because not everything has to be created externally and imported in. We actually have a whole suite of really fantastic creation tools that allow us to make some really awesome things. And we're going to talk about these magical shape layers here momentarily. Our conversation is going to take two parts. The first part is going to be shape layers. The second part is going to be something that the book actually doesn't talk about, and it's called parenting. And I want to spend some time talking about parenting. And I don't mean of the small 3-foot size parenting. I mean parenting as making relationship between layers and having the movement of one layer influence the movement of another. It's going to be pretty great. I have a fun lab exercise planned for you guys that will put this idea into practice, and it will give us an opportunity to continue to work on our keyframing skills. One of the things that we have to do constantly in computer animation is keyframe, okay? And practice the art of creating movements, because it is very, very different from anything else that you've ever done before, okay? So it's all about getting our iterations in. To be good at anything in this world, you got to put 10,000 hours worth of dedicated study into it, right? You now have 8. So you have quite a large journey in front of you. So it's important that we just get our hands dirty and just get into it, okay? Our homework is going to come directly from the book this week. It's called DJ Master. You can see a small little sample in the homework tab. There it is. So these are the hyperlinks. For whatever reason on this page it got broken. I want to fix that during lab. And it's just going to be a really fun lab exercise that's going to allow us to kind of get our hands dirty and practice using the shape layer tools. Because they're going to feel comfortable and familiar if you're used to working in like Illustrator or Photoshop or even InDesign. But there's a small little twist on these shape layer and vector tools in After Effects that really makes it poignant and specific towards the movement industry. We'll talk about those momentarily. In addition, I mentioned earlier that we're going to talk a little bit about parenting and making connections with one another, or making connections between layers. I have this great little lab exercise that will allow us to put that into practice. So we're going to focus on the construction and the animation of this. Huh? We have one lab assignment. One's for the homework, which is going to be the DJ Master, and then the lab work is going to be this Robo TV thing. And specifically, we're going to spend all of our attention trying to figure out how to make the arm of the little robot move. It's a very complex animation. From our perspective right now, this seems pretty difficult. But once we start breaking down the component pieces, looking at how we can connect all these layers together and form these direct layer relationships, it's actually not that bad. So we'll talk about that towards the end of our little conversation today. Any questions before we get started? While we're waiting, at some point over the next hour or so, if you do me a favor and go to the resources section, there's the Robo TV assets. Just go ahead and download those. You're going to need them for your lab assignment. All the content for your homework comes from the DVD that was supplied to you from the book. All right. Okay, questions, comments before we get cruising? All right, let's do it. Let me just fire open After Effects. I finally got After Effects CC installed on my laptop. Yay! So I'm on the exact same current version as you guys now, so that's exciting for me. Now there's parity across all the different computers on campus. Woo! So we're ready to rock and roll. Shape layers. Shape layers in After Effects are really kind of fun and extraordinarily entertaining. They allow us to create stuff in After Effects, opposed to bringing in all this stuff externally from Photoshop. I need to make a composition inside of After Effects. Walk me through the process. How do I create a new composition in After Effects? Composition, and then where? New composition, you got it. Let's just do it real fast. Composition. new composition, and I'm going to leave the settings as are. Right now I have a height and width of 1920 by 1080. Does anyone know what television broadcast standard this height and width follows? 1080p, you got it. You got it. I love it. And I apologize, Arthur, didn't mean to kick your bag. And let's see. And I'll just leave the duration right at 30 seconds. It's way too long for what we're going to be doing today, but you know, that's good enough for what we got. So let's just hit OK. And there it is. There's our composition. I would encourage you to follow along, absolutely. The more that you get, the more that you work inside the interface, the more comfortable this really odd work environment is going to be to you. So I definitely encourage you to follow along and poke around with the tools. 1080, you got it. And it could be any frame size. It doesn't really make a difference. 1080 is what I'm using. Okay, 1920 by 1080 with a pixel aspect ratio square. All right. So last week we talked a little bit about working with the text tool. You can find the text tool at the top of our screen, and this we kind of know. Text is awesome. Yay, hooray, text. And hopefully everyone by now is very comfortable working with inside this environment. Our homework last week allowed you to flex your muscle with the text tool, so keep using it. It's a pretty powerful system. One thing though, whenever we're creating assets inside of After Effects, the computer's automatically, always going to generate a couple things for us down here in our timeline, right? Does anyone remember from our conversations over the last couple weeks what the common denominator between all layers are, inside the timeline down there at the bottom? What is the one thing that all layers have? Yeah. They all belong to the same composition, specifically just on the layer level. Don't go into that composition level yet. What do all layers have in common on a technical level? Yeah, absolutely. And specifically, where can we find those attributes and characteristics? The little arrow, yeah. This little arrow right there. That gray arrow, when we click on it, is going to expand to show us a number of things. And specifically, what I'm going for is that transform section. The transform is the common denominator. This transform section, as we learned during the Butterfly Open lab assignment, allows us to determine the placement of this object within the screen, as well as the rotation and the transparency, okay, and the size with scale. These 5 channels, these transform channels, are universal. All layers have these 5 transform channels. We can't ignore them. Now, this is an important idea to keep in mind as we start to work with shape layers, because we're going to infuse a new layer type into the mix today. You've worked with some video assets, you've worked with some still images. Last week you spent some time working with text layers. Well, we're going to add a shape layer into the mix now, which brings with it some nuance when it comes to working inside this transform section. Now keep in mind, we're working on a layer, so the entire output of this transform section is going to determine the placement of that layer. So if I was to change its position, the entire layer moves, right? Change its rotation, the entire layer rotates, okay? Layered-based transformations. Everything has it. Can't avoid it. There's always going to be a transform section on every single layer. With that said, let's add a new layer type into our toolbox. Let's just delete that bad boy. And now I'm going to make a shape layer. You know what I'm going to do real quick, just to kind of illustrate an important distinction. I want to import in just a photograph. And let me just go to SCC here. And I'm just going to grab, I don't know, it doesn't really matter what. Let's see if I can find just a photograph real quick. Ew, what am I doing? That'll work. Golden Gate Bridge will work. Awesome. So I've just brought into After Effects photograph of the Golden Gate Bridge. Fantastic. Beautiful, right? Beautiful. FYI, has anyone been down to the city recently? Driven across the new Bay Bridge? Is it cool? Yeah? Is it cool? Especially at night. Especially at night. I've heard the lights coming down the cables are pretty cool. It feels like you're on a highway. Say again? It feels like you're on a highway. Really? Yeah. I got to go give it a try. I used to work in San Francisco, and I used to go across the Bay Bridge all the time, but when I moved back up here to Sacramento, I find it, my trips down there have become very infrequent. Okay, let's check this out, because I bring this up, and I imported this photograph to illustrate a very, very important detail about working with a series of tools inside of After Effects. Now, the only layer that I have in my composition right now is that photograph. And notice that it's selected. Visually, what tells you that it's selected? Yeah, so you see some little cubes, floating around the bounding box of the layer. Rock and roll, nice visual confirmation that something's selected. What about downstairs in the timeline? What tells you that something's selected? Yeah, the background color of that layer is a light gray, so it kind of looks highlighted, right? Two different things that kind of lets you know that this layer is the active layer. Any change that we make is going to happen to specifically this layer. When a layer is selected, it also directs After Effects to change the behavior of our shape tools. Okay, check it out. At the top of our interface, in our toolbar, of course we have our text tool, okay? But these two tools over here allow us to make shapes. If you're coming from another Adobe application, the pen tool is going to feel very comfortable to you. It works identically here in After Effects as it does in the other Adobe apps, which is rock and roll. I love that, and it actually makes working between the apps much, much easier. And then the tool that's immediately to the left of it, this is our shape tool. Now, I want you to watch what happens when I use the rectangle tool while a layer is currently selected. So keep that in mind. I got my Golden Gate Bridge photograph selected. I've just turned on my rectangle tool. Now, common sense and logic would say to you, hey, I'm going to make a rectangle, right? Or let's do something else. Let's not do a rectangle. I'm going to left click and hold on the button, and I'm going to do, I don't know, a star, because I can. Now, logic would say that I'm going to create a star, but with the layer currently actively selected in the interface, it doesn't create a star. What does it do? Yeah, it masks the star, or masks the photograph in the shape of a star. This is a very, very important difference. If any layer is selected inside of After Effects, the shape tools aren't going to make a shape. It's going to mask that layer according to that shape's path. Okay? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. The shape tools change their function based on a selection. And we're going to have an entire conversation in the future about masks. So this isn't the last time we're going to talk about them. Coming up here shortly, we're going to spend a lot of time, probably more time than you would like me to spend, on the importance of masks. If there's one thing that all After Effects and motion graphics artists should have at their disposal, is the ability to understand and create complex masking networks. So the conversation will continue. But just note, whenever you create a mask, so if you accidentally do this on your own work, and you want to get rid of your mask, you don't have to delete the layer. The mask is now a component, a child item of that layer. So I can just go into that mask section downstairs, hit the backspace key, boom, it's gone. And now we're back to what we had earlier. All right. So I just very quickly there deselected my Golden Gate Bridge asset. It's no longer highlighted. The little cubes around the bounding box of the layer have disappeared, as have that light gray background color on the layer itself. So nothing's selected right now. Without anything selected, let's see what the shape tools are going to generate now. So if I still got my star tool selected, left click and drag, and hey, there it is. Now we have a star, a custom shape that we created right here in After Effects. Before we go into some of the details and the particulars of working with this custom shape, let's talk about what the After Effects engine has created for us down in our timeline, because it's created something new that we haven't seen before. If you look carefully, right above my Golden Gate Bridge layer, you can see that we've created our first shape layer. And there it is. Ta-da! Okay. Got a cool little icon for it. It's always going to be a star, by the way. And it's always going to say shape layer 1. Can I rename this? Yes. Yeah, how do I rename layers in After Effects? Enter. You got it. Enter. Select it, hit the return key, hats. I'm a star. Okay. Love it. So we have a brand new layer called I'm a star. Okay. However, there's a couple different elements in this that are different. Okay. Shape layers are vector-based. Rock and roll. But for those of you that are uninitiated, what is the difference between a vector image and a bitmap image?
When you scale them, they don't lose, I don't know the word for it, but...
Which one? Which one are you talking about?
Vector.
Vector. Yeah, okay. A lot of people know that a vector image is that when you scale it, you get larger and smaller, you don't lose any quality, right? The shape is always going to be perfect. Rock and roll. We like this, right? We like vector images because they're no longer dependent on a resolution to define the quality of that shape, right? They're resolution independent. How is a vector shape made? What determines the shape of our little star here? The points, and more specifically, the path between those points, right? In every sense, vector shapes are computer created. They're mathematically driven, kind of made by an algorithm, if you will, that determines their overall shape. Okay, that path is what determines the shape. Since it's all computer driven, we can scale it up and down. We're just we're just multiplying numbers into the mathematical algorithm. The computer updates that, and it's always going to look perfect. We love this, right? Because now we can use the exact same image on a business card as we do on a billboard. Frankie. Okay. Yeah, just deselect your photograph by clicking on the empty part. There you go. Now you can go ahead and make any shape that you want. Create a shape layer. Yeah, the part that really gets people hung up is deselecting a layer before you left click and drag to create that shape. With a layer selected, it's always going to create a mask. All right. So on the opposite side of the fence, we have vector images, right? Resolution independent. They can be any size they want. They're always going to look perfect, right? This is good. This is great. We love that. We want to work with vector images as much as we possibly can, right? However, and Frankie, make sure that layer is deselected before you draw your shapes, because as you can see, it's masking it. Excuse me. On the other side of the fence, we have bitmap images, right? What are bitmap images? Help me out. Let's talk some theory here. Get specific. It's pixel-based, right? What is a great example of a pixel-based image?
JPEG.
JPEG, right? What makes JPEGs? Cameras. Cameras make JPEGs. Of many things that make JPEGs, okay? This is a pixel-based image, right? This pixel-based image has a defined height and width, right? This is just a gigantic grid of pixels. And I know you guys have probably seen the result of a scaling operation done on a JPEG, right? It gets really artifacty. The edges get really, really blocky and kind of chunky. So it's not exactly an image type that we like to work with. Pop quiz. Are video files vector or bitmap based? They're bitmaps. Interesting problem, isn't it? We have, managing bitmaps and vector images is constantly going to be a challenge for us. Luckily for us, in After Effects, it's a little bit easier, okay? The guys down at Adobe have gone out of their way to bring to the surface all the different elements that we need to manipulate to understand how the computer is creating these shapes for us. However, we can't forget the idea of a layered-based workflow inside of After Effects. Now let that sink in and really kind of write it down in your notes and inscribe it on your arm. After Effects is a layered-based workflow, okay? When we create a custom shape, we're actually creating a layer, and then a component of that layer is the path that fundamentally determines the size and shape of our star, okay? So if you think about it, we actually have two hierarchies that we're working within here. We have a layer hierarchy, which is always going to be the top. It's the parent, right? This is the driver. And then we have a child, polystar 1, of that parent. That polystar 1, that's the actual shape of our star, okay? Everyone kind of understand that so far? Questions on it? Okay, great. All right, now that we kind of have a little bit more understanding of, we got our layer, and then connected to that layer is a polystar, which is the actual star itself. We can start talking about some of the details that are really, really important during the creation stage of any shape inside of After Effects. Now, I'm going to delete my, my star. I'm going to delete it, the backspace key, and this time, let's go up here. I think I'm going to make a rounded rectangle, perhaps. There we go. All right. A couple things that people often miss when working with the vector shape tools are its tool properties. Just like just like Photoshop and Illustrator, the moment you turn on a tool, After Effects is going to present a number of options to you. I think Adobe has done a bad job of bringing all these options a little bit more to the surface, but they're right there. Okay, they're kind of hidden to the middle part of the interface. And whenever you create a shape layer, you're always going to get the option to change its fill type and its stroke type. Whenever you see yellow text that's with a dotted underline, what does that represent? What should that say to you? Yeah, click me. Click me. There's more stuff inside of me. This is a link, okay? I want to be manipulated. So if I go in, check it out. I can go in, I can click on the word fill. You're going to get a small little popover on your screen. There it is. And you're going to get some options, including the ability to have no fill, so create a shape with just an outline around it. We can have a solid fill, a gradient fill, a linear gradient, and a radial gradient. Okay? Question? I'm sorry. If I didn't get your question, please interrupt me. So we get to change what type of fill pattern we want at this level here. Okay? We can also change its blending mode and its opacity, just right off the bat if we wanted to. I'm going to leave my fill level set to solid. And if I go back to my tool options, clicking on the color swatch will allow me to very quickly change the color of whatever custom shape I'm trying to create. Now let's make it a blue. All right, and I can left click and drag. Ta-da! And there it is. Ah, pretty great. We also have some options for a stroke, which, as you guys know, is just a fancy word for an outline. We also get the same stroke options. No stroke, solid color, radial gradient, and linear gradient. Okay? So that's pretty cool. If we did a linear gradient, perhaps on our stroke, we can go back into the color picker, which is now transformed, into a gradient editor. And this is what the gradient editor looks like in After Effects. It's not too dissimilar from the gradient editor that you're used to seeing over in some of the other Adobe apps. Color picker on the bottom, and then the transition handles up there on the top. Just click on the word, or your stroke will give you the options. I clicked on the gradient option, and then if you click on the color swatch, then you'll get the editor, the color picker. Okay. All right. Now, one final thing, I forgot to mention this. We also have an option here to change the size of our outline, which is kind of nice. And we'll come back to this Bezier path a little bit later. That's something that's kind of fun. We'll talk about that here momentarily. All right, you can see my gradient going here. Let's just change the color. Instead of going from white to black, let's have it go to white to, I don't know, green. Or green to red. There we go, just so we can see it in action here. Okay, so we have our options up here at the top. And really what we're doing when we're selecting all of these options is we're changing these fill options and these stroke options on the entire layer. This is a layer-based toggle. However, we can go on in and change these on a per path layer as well. Check it out. If we go into Rectangle 1, downstairs in my timeline, here's Rectangle 1, which is physically responsible for creating the path that you see on the screen here. We also have some controls, including a gradient stroke, where we can go in and change a number of the parameters, including the start point, the end point, the opacity. Here's the width again. Some other goodness in here, okay? Which is pretty cool. And what we're changing here is the gradient, or excuse me, the stroke width just for this one rectangle. Notice that on the layer, it's still set to 36. So we get to control these parameters at the parent level and then at the child level as well. So two different hierarchies that we can roll within. Of course, we can also do that for the fill as well. So here's fill 1. Woo-doo. And we have some options here that allow us to change the interior fill. Yeah, you can change the color. Anything with the stopwatch next to it allows us to animate that value, for sure. So a great way to animate the color of a cube just by making it a vector image, and then we can animate that. Animate the fill color. Okay. So I've been working, I've been changing some things here, and let's make this a really big, obvious change. I want to go in to my fill one, and I want to make the fill color red, okay, or a shade of red. There we go, on rectangle 1. Now earlier we were working with our shape layer. Can we have more than one path associated with the shape layer? Yeah, absolutely. If the shape layer is selected, check it out. I can go back in and let's do this. Let's make a circle, for example. And it adopts all the layer settings as well, which is pretty neat. If we examine the contents of our layers palette downstairs, we have ellipse 1, here's the rectangle. We can absolutely go in and continue to transform these and control their parameters on an individual basis. Now I got a blue one. I want to get rid of that stroke. Let's do a radial stroke. You can also, if you wanted to get rid of the stroke entirely, just select it, the backspace key, and we can get rid of it that way too, which is kind of neat. All right, let's talk about transforming and moving these little paths around. Probably the most frustrating thing for people when working with shape layers is remembering that you're working on child paths of a parent layer. I have 2 paths on here, an ellipse and a rectangle, that are children of our shape layer 1. If you notice, shape layer 1 has a dedicated transform section, okay, at the very bottom of the list. I want to collapse the content section, go into transform, and here are those 5 standard transform elements that we're used to seeing, including position, scale, rotation, and opacity. If I was to change the position of this layer, what's happening? Yeah, all the children are coming along for the ride. Both the sphere and the rectangle, who are children of this layer, are being changed, are having their position changed. Interesting. So what if I wanted to go in and leave the rectangle where it was, but move the circle independently from that? What would I have to do? Yeah, we've got to go find that path, right? If you look carefully, let's go into the content section. I'm going to collapse transform contents. This is where we find the path information for both my shapes. Here's ellipse 1 if we expand it. Of course, we have some options in here for the color. This is where you'd find that stroke options. But check it out right here. We have transform. Each path gets its own transform section that includes all the standard stuff and then a couple more, including skew, skew axis. I think those are the only 2 that come in addition to this. Okay, so we can absolutely go in and manipulate these elements independently by navigating to this level of our hierarchy. And let's just do it real fast. Let's just change it. And now I'm working with just the circle. I'm going to change the fill color of my circle to something other than blue. Right now, let's just do white. There we go. All right. Okay, let's go in, grab ellipse 1. Now, if you're in the direct selection tool, you can also continue to manipulate your paths using that tool. Just remember that you need to have that path selected. A lot of folks, they forget that their shape layer is the one that's selected, and they'll click on their shape layer, and then they'll click and drag, and everything moves, and then they'll like double click. And well, sometimes they won't double click, but if you do double click, it will select the path automatically for you. So keep that in mind. There we go. And I can manipulate these independently from the rest, which is pretty neat. All right. Questions, questions, questions. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention this, and I apologize. If you look carefully at the screen here, every path comes with its own anchor point. This is actually really, really important. We can change the location of our anchor points at any time. Do you remember what tool we were supposed to use to change the location of our anchor point? What's it called? The pan behind tool, which is the weirdest thing on the face of the planet. What? The pan behind tool? Just crazy. Absolutely entertaining that they've called it the pan behind tool. Here in After Effects, oh, I guess in CS6 they added the little tooltip highlight. Here it is. Now at least it says anchor point in parentheses. It didn't used to say this for like the longest time, right? It was the most frustrating thing on the face of the planet because you try to grab and change the anchor point, but you wouldn't know what tool to use, right? Well, now they've kind of thrown us a bone and they've put in parentheses anchor point. So this can be applied to everything that has an anchor point. So let's just grab the pan behind tool. And now I can go in and change the anchor point just by left clicking and dragging on it to any place inside my scene. Now when I rotate my ellipse, it's going to rotate around the local anchor point of that path. Please note when working with shape layers, the layer itself also gets its own anchor point, which is always going to be in the center of the layer. Okay? And of course, you can change that anchor point by using the pan behind tool as well. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. I like working with the vector tools inside of After Effects. They allow us to do a lot of really neat things. A lot of really neat things. This is just but one. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, explain one more time how to separate the stroke color in
How to separate the stroke color. Great. Ah, right. Yes. On the rectangle. All right. Let me go into my rectangle. So I'm in my rectangle right now, and I have my gradient stroke. Okay. And if I could click on the arrow, there we go. We have a number of different options, including linear, radial. We can change, oops, let's not go to radial because that's a little bit more difficult to see. The start and end point will allow you to change the transition width between these two colors. So it's a little bit more manual. There is a widget it's kind of hard to see, but it is there. That little widget right there will allow you to interactively change the start and end point of your gradient. So hooray for that. Okay. Maybe you want your gradient going in the opposite direction. You can change your start and end point to go vertically or maybe diagonally. You have lots of choices there, which is kind of nice. Okay. In addition, all of those child components of our gradient stroke, we have colors, which we can also animate, rock and roll. The opacity, the stroke width. This is actually kind of neat. This isn't going to work at the moment because I'm working with a rounded rectangle. But you can change the mitered corners for your strokes, just like Illustrator, which is kind of nice, just by these guys. This is kind of, I find this really interesting and entertaining. I think I'm the only person that appreciates this. But you can do dashes by clicking on that little plus sign. And you can change your outline into a whole series of dashes. This used to be very difficult to do in After Effects, and now they've automated it to just having that one thing. And it's really kind of nice because as a motion guy, I'm always looking for very interesting and unique ways to incorporate something, kind of geometric, which is neat. So we can increase the number of dashes or decrease. This is something you can animate. The offset amount will allow us to rotate them around, which is kind of neat. So a lot of fun controls there on the gradient. One other thing that I wanted, did I answer your question, Tomoko? Yeah, okay, great. One other thing that I wanted to remind you guys of, since we're working with vector shapes, we could go into the actual path itself. I'm on rectangle path now, not the two components that are going to determine how it's drawn, but the path, and check it out. Of course, we get to change the size of the path, but a number of these shapes have options that will allow you to change the shape of your path.
Can you add a gradient to dashes?
Can you say again?
If you do dashes around an object, can you make it a gradient?
Yeah, absolutely. My outline, my stroke was a gradient, and as you can see, my dashes are transitioning its color. But back to the path real fast. A number of these shape layers are going to come with some additional channels that will allow you to change the path. Specifically, on rectangle path 1, the roundness can change how round the corners are. And this just makes my day, actually. I love this. When they first introduced this, I think I said, very verbal, woohoo! This is so good because, man, just being able to change the roundness of your corners is a really neat in After Effects. You used to have to go back to Illustrator, change the roundness over there, re-import the Illustrator document, and then that was very much a machine in the way. Now we have that level of control right in the app. Awesome, love it. Okay, it reduces my dependency on those outside applications to make some really great things. Okay. As a further example of this, check it out. If I go back, let's make a star. There's my star, okay? And if we go into the Polystar 1 path down in our timeline, and I'm not going to worry about how it's being drawn, but on the path section here, we can determine the number of points, okay? So this is a smart vector path system. It's not kind of a dumb one where it's what you see is what you get. We can change the paths quite significantly to get the result that we want. Okay? I think the stars is such a great illustration of that. I can change the number of points. I can change, the outside radius, the roundness level of all the points. I mean, within a couple mouse clicks, we can create shapes that are very, very custom and quickly. All right, questions? Yes?
I was wondering if you can edit individual points like you can in Illustrator.
Absolutely. The one thing that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet is the ability to go in and change the path. And you can. You can go in and change the path. Let's see. Let me get into the right tool here. I'm going to grab the direct selection tool. Now with these polystars, you can go in, I believe. Oops. Let me just turn off everything but the polystar. And I want to lock my golden gate. Now, can you do it on the shapes, on the presets? That I'm not 100% sure about. Let's see. My inclination is yes. I'm missing a step. You can also reverse the path, which is something that's not really applicable here. But if you need to make a custom path where you can go in and edit all the control vertices, the pen tool is your jam. And you can find the pen tool right up here next to the shape tool. I don't think you really can go in. No, excuse me, you can. I don't do it very often, which is why my brain is kind of dumping on it right now. I think you have to convert it to a Bezier path, and then you can go in and change all of your stuff. Yeah, there we go. So you need to, let me do that again, because I know I did it really fast. For that, I apologize. So when you're creating anything, let's just do a polygon. If Bezier path is turned on, whoop, now we get control vertices that we can go in and select and continue to refine.
Wait, how do you do that?
Yeah, let's do it one more time. Excuse me. I'll do an ellipse. It's in your tool options. Bezier path right there. I think that's actually something that's new and popped up in CC. That didn't used to be there. And I remember we were always locked into.
If you have CS6, how would you still do it?
This is the hack. The way I've always done it is I've used the pen tool. I've drawn my shape, and then I've kind of basically traced over that with the pen tool. Yeah, it's a hack. It's a hack. It's not perfect, but it is what it is, right? So let's talk about the pen tool here for a second. I'll get rid of my shape layers, and let's make a new one. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, and the pen tool works identically to the way the pen tool behaves over in other Adobe applications. It's very, very comfortable. Don't resist the pen tool, okay? The pen tool is your friend. It really is. A lot of people find working with the pen tool uncomfortable because it is a very different work environment, but don't resist the pen tool. All roads lead to the pen tool. You get good at the pen tools, doors will open. The quality of your work will skyrocket. Trust me, it really will. So let's go over how we can work with the pen tool here in After Effects. It behaves almost identically. So if we click once, you're going to create a new shape layer, and you're going to create your first control vertex. If you click a second time, you're going to create just a simple path, okay? So this is an open path. It's not a closed path. It's a line at this moment. I want to create a closed custom shape. So let's continue going in and adding all these elements together. You can see that my stroke is being applied to it. Fantastic. If I click on the third time, there we go. You can start to see that the computer is starting to triangulate the surface, but it's still an open path. If we want to create a custom shape, which I would encourage you that you do and play around with, let's just add a couple more points in here. At the end of the day, when you're happy with the way your custom shape looks, make sure that you hover your mouse back onto the first control vertex along your path to close the path. You can still work with an open path, but as you can see, that last stroke, that last side of my surface, is not going to adopt the strokes. Let me close my path by clicking on the first control vertex in my scene, and there we go. And now we've created a custom path. All right. You can go in and select any one of those control vertices and edit their location, which is pretty great. It's still a shape layer. How we created that shape layer does not make a difference to the After Effects shape layer engine. So it's a first-class citizen. So we can still go in,
as an example, I can go in and find my gradient stroke, give some dashes if I wanted to, and I'm on my way. And all of these are totally animatable and editable as we go through the entire process. Ta-da! Pretty cool. It's really quite simple to use. In addition, you're more than welcome. Let me just get rid of that. I'll make another one. These are also Bezier handles. I want to turn off my stroke just temporarily. These are also Bezier handles, so if you left click and drag, you get your tangent handles popping out, so you can create curvy shapes. Editing these shapes is identical to how you're used to working with them inside of After Effects, or Photoshop, excuse me. If I grab my direct selection tool, I can select the path. Often, and this is a struggle for even me, working with the control vertices after I've created them can be a little bit of a challenge. I want to go in and just select the path, right? Well, I share your frustrations. Here's what I do whenever I'm trying to grab a path. I go in and I physically grab the shape itself. Then I left click my mouse out, and sometimes it works on shape layers, other times it doesn't. There we go. The double click allowed me to get in there. But you just got to get to a point where you can select the control vertices to continue refining the path. In After Effects, I believe it's the Option key. Yeah, oh, no, excuse me. Hello, oh, I may have broken it. There we go. What is it? Definitely not that. You can break the tangent handles. I'm having a brain dump at the moment. Yeah, go ahead. Can you make a mask of what? Over a video? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Identically. Yep, you got it. You got it. We're going to be talking a lot about masking video here shortly. That's a big part of what we do in motion graphics, is remove parts of our videos for a number of different reasons, for sure. And my brain has re-engaged its Command Option to break the tangent handles. And you only have to do it once. Once the handles are broken, they're broken forever. You can go in and continue to customize your shape. Pen tool, get used to working with it. It's pretty fantastic. All right, I want to show you one other feature of working with shape layers. Question? Oh. I want to show you one other feature with working with shape layers that's kind of different. Okay. Shape layers in After Effects are really an accumulation of a number of different elements kind of attached to one another. We have the shape 1, then we have a path. We also have attached to shape 1 a stroke 1, a fill 1, and a transform for shape 1. So there's really a whole series of different channels all parented to shape 1. Well, what if I don't want to have an outline? I'm free to delete it if I'd like, okay? Or if I don't want to have a fill color, I'm free to delete it. So, for example, let's go in and just hit the backspace key. Now, the path is still intact, but I've removed that fill channel from that path. Well, what if I go forward the next day, my creative director comes in and says, Pat, I love that little blue shape that you make, but I would really, really like it if it had a white outline around it. And me being the great artist, I'd go, yeah, no problem, because I can quickly add and edit my shapes after the fact. A lot of folks, they forget or they often miss a very critically important button inside of the shape layer section downstairs, and it's this add. I want to select shape 1, and if you click on this little add button, you'll get a little contextual menu, which will allow you to add in a number of components into this shape layer. And you can see that we have some familiar ones, including rectangle, ellipse, polystar, and path, okay? But check it out. I can add a gradient stroke or a gradient fill or just a regular stroke and a regular fill. Let's do gradient stroke and see what happens to my little shape here. Gradient stroke. It then becomes a child of this hierarchy in here. And I can go in and let's just give it a little bit of width. Yeah, and there it is, and it's back. So we can subtract and add all of these individual components at the shape layer to create some very, very complex paths and complex layers going forward. questions on that? Because we're about to expand on it. And this is actually one of the really neat things about working inside of After Effects. And it kind of illustrates the power of the path system, of the shape layer system. Now, let me just get rid of this shape layer because it's kind of a funky looking one.
Is After Effects the industry standard for this kind of stuff? Or
Can you say that again?
is After Effects the industry standard for these kind of?
For motion graphics? Absolutely. Yeah. After Effects is the industry standard for all things animation. It really is. For the broadcast world. For the broadcast, feature film compositing, feature film effects, After Effects is the industry standard. It's used everywhere. If it moves, probably done in After Effects.
So, or if you animate with Moto, would you still probably want to put it in After Effects to touch it up or anything?
Yeah, there's, and I should qualify my statement just a moment ago. It is the industry standard for 2D animation. For 2D animation, okay? It is a broadcast motion graphics tool. It's not a 3D animation tool, so you're not going to be able to do a Pixar film in After Effects yet. We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. We really are. I think every year we get one step closer and closer and closer to doing really, really good 3D work in After Effects. CC has some really neat 3D things in here that we're going to be exploring as we continue to go on throughout the semester. These shape layers are going to come back to haunt you when we start talking about 3D stuff. So more on that as we get closer to that conversation. Okay. So it's used in the 2D world, I'd say almost exclusively. There are some other competitors out there, but they definitely don't have the market share that After Effects is currently blessed with having. It's the oldest. It's been around since the beginning. So just purely by its longevity, most people know and understand how it's operated. Okay, it's like Photoshop. There can only be one, right? Even though there are competitors on the market. Okay. I want to show you some other really neat things about working with shape layers inside of After Effects. And to do so, I'm just going to bring out, I don't know, let's do a little rounded rectangle. There we go. And let's go into the path itself. And I'm going to increase the roundness of my rectangle if I can click on the arrow. There we go. Go into the path options, not the path options. Oh, wait, Bezier is on still. So let me get rid of rectangle and then draw it again. Now I get my path options. Let's increase the roundness a little bit. There we go. All right. So on shape layer 1, I'm also going to create a circle. And I'm going to hold down the shift key while I draw my circle to constrain its proportions and make a perfect circle. To make it a little bit easier to see what's going on here, I'm going to go into my ellipse 1 layer and just change its fill color. Just make it white, just so it's a little bit easier for us to see. Shoot, while we're at it, let's go in and give our rectangle just a little bit of a stroke. And there we go. Something like that. Okay, let's make the stroke color red, because I like red. Red and blue, classic colors. Okay. What if, at the end of the day, I would like to have a hole, an ellipse hole, an ellipse-shaped hole cut into my rectangle? A perfectly circular, or maybe a perfectly half-circular hole cut into my rectangle. Yeah, merge. And this is where the power of the After Effects vector tool shape engine comes into play. It's pulling a lot of technology that we're used to seeing in like Illustrator, and it's bringing it home into After Effects, and it's fantastic. If we go back into our timeline, this add menu is where we are able to add in a custom gradient fill and a stroke. We also have a number of commands down here. Let's check out merge paths. It's pretty neat. Oops, excuse me, and I am on the long, I gotta apologize. There we go. I need to have the layer selected and then do merge paths, and that's what we're after. Okay, I had the path selected when I hit it, and I wasn't getting the result that I wanted. And now we have something that's pretty neat, right? We've changed the shape of my rectangle. I've in effect have done like a union operation between the ellipse and the rectangle, and now I got a little bump out at the bottom of my rectangle. Awesome. All of our vector paths are still live, so we're free to go in and continue to transform these things at will. So I can still grab my circle. You can see what it does, which is pretty neat. And this allows me to do some very complex designing in-app, which is kind of neat. However, we're still left with the challenge that was originally laid in front of us. I didn't want to have a kind of, little bump on the bottom of my rectangle. I wanted a hole. So what are we to do? Has anyone stumbled upon the answer to this? What would happen if you change the layer order? Maybe we put the rectangle on top. So right now, my circle's on top. If I take my rectangle, move it to the top of the stack, nothing happens. Sorry, merge path, I think, has to go to the top. We'll get there eventually. Hold on, folks. Come on. Oh, wait, you know what? This is my fault. No, I had it right. I forgot in merge paths. Duh, Pat. We have a mode called add. What if we did subtract? You can see the results. There it is. But the order here is going to determine how it's subtracted. Okay? We had ellipse 1 initially on top, and when the mode's set to subtract, you're seeing that we're getting just kind of a half circle, which is neat. Changing the layer order with the mode set to subtract will give us the result that we want. I apologize for not toggling the mode. And all this stuff is still live. So we can go in and change all this whenever we want. Shoot, we could even add another one into the mix. What would happen if I duplicated my ellipse? Edit, duplicate. Now I got 2 ellipses. Boom. Allows me to very quickly ideate and go through all my iterations and make some very custom shapes quickly without having to go over to Illustrator or Photoshop and leverage those tool sets. I just had it selected. Let me do it one more time. I selected my path, ellipse 2, and then at the top of the screen where it says edit, I chose duplicate, Command D, and then I just moved the path. You're welcome. Pretty cool. That shape right there would have been historically very difficult to make with the pen tool. Look at the accuracy of shapes combined with the Boolean operations, with add and subtract, with the merge tool. We can create something that's definitely more complex. But the fun doesn't stop there. Check it out. Inside that add menu, we're able to do a lot of really neat things. I'm going to go in just really quickly and add, let's get rid of my merge. Don't need my merge anymore, and I certainly don't need all these layers. Let's just add a star. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of my rectangle and then all of my circles. There we go. So check it out. Under the add menu, we also have a number of other commands in here that will do some really neat things, like pucker and bloat. Awesome. We'll change the behavior of our path a little bit. Yeah, kind of cool. These are all.
When you're on top of your image, so.
This is something that can only be done for paths. So it only can be done for vector shapes.
No, but so you can, like, the blue part is, can you do it so that's see-through? No.
Yeah, absolutely. So
No fill?
no fill. Yeah, just go. I'm in the wrong one. Just go into your fill. You turn the opacity down. And it's not doing a single thing. What's going on here? Why didn't that zero it out? Color, well, the color is just going to change it. Or not. Why isn't it updating? Hold on a sec. Let me see what's happening. Maybe the pucker and bloat overwriting everything? Nope. I stand corrected. Why are we not getting what we want? Oops, excuse me. There we go. My composite rule was changed. Now we're above previous and same group. So now, yeah, there we go. And now if I reduce the opacity, this is what we're getting hung up on. And I struggle to remember this at times as well. You got to keep in mind that each path has its own fill and stroke values. but then the layer has its own fill and stroke values, which is where the conflict is residing. So we can overwrite the entire thing by going into our fill and say, no fill. Here we go. Yeah, the beauty of the system is often very difficult to continue to manage and work with these multiple hierarchies. So there's plucker and boat. Kind of fun. There's a whole bunch of them in here. You know, trim paths. I've used this one from time to time. Great way to make animated wipes, because now we can go in and do something like this. Really neat for custom effects. Just changing that start and end percentage will allow us to draw on shapes pretty quickly. It's kind of fun. You can even offset it by an angle. Not as noticeable here. There we go, with our star. That's kind of cool. A little bit of motion in the background. This is what I really wanted to show you guys. This is actually kind of neat. One of the effects in here is called repeater, and you're going to be using this in your homework. And the repeater is really kind of great because it allows us to go in and make copies of these paths programmatically. Yeah, it's under add, and then it's right there, repeater. I'm not going to go through all of these, but repeater is something that you're going to use in your homework, and it's going to allow you to make, you know, as many copies of that path as you want. Only works in shapes. So these are vector options. These are vector options. You can offset them a little bit. Now they're offsetting them from the original. I don't historically do this, but check this action out. Now, the thing that a lot of people forget is that there's a transform dedicated just for the repeater. So if you wanted to continue to move and rotate like all of your copies, check it out. I can like rotate all my copies. Then each copy is going to be rotated negative 8 degrees from the last one. So you can create some really cool spinning motions. The opacity is kind of fun because now I can have like trails of stars, so they'll fade out as they go through their movement. You can also kind of grow their position and change their position like this. If we go into the actual star itself, the polystar, and transform it, since the repeater is a child of the polystar, we can create some really neat offsets in there as well. Very powerful tool that allows us to repeat things over and over and over again without needing to have a bazillion layers. I find this actually quite valuable. I use repeating shapes often in my design work, and I hate having to have a bazillion different paths just to create, you know, a pattern of something. With the repeater, I can do it very, very quickly with only having one layer with one path and one series of information to kind of wrangle. Questions on how to work with vector shapes inside of After Effects. You're going to find them to be extraordinarily useful, I think. I love them. They're great. No? Everyone's good? Kind of got the basics down? All right. I'll tell you what. Let's take a small little break, and we'll come back in. We'll talk about parenting. Alrighty, folks, let's get back to it. I wanted to spend the remainder of our evening tonight talking about something that's really not addressed in the book all that much, or actually at all. Actually, it's called parenting, and it's an important concept that allows us to make relationships between layers inside of After Effects. And let me just kind of illustrate this as simply as I can, and then we'll jump into talking about specifically how you guys are going to complete your lab assignment this week. We've talked about text layers, talked about shape layers. There's actually one other type of layer that I want to introduce tonight. It's probably the most simple layer that you can build. Earlier we were describing the difference between a vector image and a rasterized bitmap image. And you know, we spent the last hour or so talking about the awesomeness of the vector shape engine inside of After Effects, but there's also a rasterized bitmap engine inside of After Effects as well. Let me go down, have my composition selected. And if you go to the layer pull-down menu at the top of the screen, we can create a new layer, and then there it is, a solid layer. A solid layer. So we have text layers, which we saw last week. We have shape layers, which we've been talking a lot about over the last hour or so. And then the third layer type is a solid layer. Now, what we are crafting when we click on this button is a rasterized bitmap image. So if we click on it, we'll get a little popover that will allow us to define the shape of the bitmap image, the resolution, the height and width. So it's almost always going to take the height and width of your composition and load that into the parameters for the width and height of this layer. So there's a couple things we get to change: the resolution, the width and height. Let's just change it. Let's make it, oh, I don't know. Let's make it 300 by 50. Be pixels, they'll be square pixels, and then we can also change a color. So we'll give it a color. Hit OK, and there it is. Ta-da! There's our dorky little rectangles. So these are rasterized bitmap images. So any sort of scaling operation that we you look confused. What can I do to help with that?
Just restart what you just did, please.
OK. So I'm creating a shape layer. So with the composition selected, I went to the top of the screen where it says layer, new, solid. Okay? Making a solid layer. These are bitmap images. So we get to define the overall height and width. Okay?
Could you right-click the timeline and do the same thing?
Your computer restarted when you did that? Awesome. So it looks like Computer Services hasn't fixed your computer yet. That's fantastic. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, go to a different machine, unfortunately. I think that's the solution at this point. To answer Arthur's question, I believe you can if you right-click on the... Yeah, right-click new and then solid. Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. You're doing the exact same thing. Just two different ways of getting to the exact same result. On that note, you can also edit these. These are not permanently written in stone. So if you wanted it to be green instead of red, you could select your shape layer, or excuse me, your solid layer in your timeline, return to the layer pull-down menu at the top of the screen and select solid settings. This is going to pop up whenever you have a solid layer selected. And then you can go and change the color and return back to the original settings. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these are rasterized bitmap images. So any sort of scaling to this image is going to result in some pretty low quality. Let's see if I can illustrate that. Yeah, you can already start to see the edges are getting a little bit blurry there. I don't know how much of that you can see on your projector, but on my screen it's becoming very, very apparent that I've taken something very small and made it very big.
Why would you use that as opposed to...
They're a little bit easier to wrangle. You know, you don't have to worry about paths. Sometimes you just want a color in the background, or you need just a cube of something. They have their applications. For the longest time, to be entirely honest with you, this is the only creation tool that we had in After Effects. So it's definitely a legacy system. Is it our shape layer superior? Yes, in every sense, but they're there. I know some people, they like working with shape layers, or excuse me, solid layers, because you can apply effects to them. So there are some reasons in there that you'd want to do. Like for example, and this is going into the Wayback Machine, for the longest time, we didn't have shape layers. So the only way for us to get a gradient in the background, and this is showing its age, I'll make comp size, okay? is to take my green solid, which perfectly matches the size of my composition, and generate a ramp. If I can remember where it is. Where is it? Or 4-color gradient. That'll do the exact same thing. This used to be the only way to make a gradient in the background. Yeah, crazy, huh? We're going to talk about effects more in the next couple of weeks. Where is it? Have they moved it on me again? They've moved it on me again. I hate that. Drives me absolutely crazy. I'm horrible with, here we go, gradient ramp. They've changed the name of it. It used to be just ramp. Now it's gradient ramp. There it is. That used to be the only way to get a gradient inside of After Effects, was going that way. And then if you wanted a circle, guess what you have to do? You'd have to mask it. Yeah. And now we have, yeah, crazy, right? That used to be the only way for us to make gradients inside of After Effects for a number of years. Okay. Anyways, that's not what I wanted to talk about. But just to kind of give you a little bit of a window into the past. We have it really good these days. All right. So let me make a new solid layer, and I'm doing this just to keep it relatively easy. I don't want to have to deal with paths. I just want to have to illustrate how to make relationships between a number of these layers. I'm going to have this little green thing. This is going to be bar 1, and I'm going to duplicate it. So if I want to select the layer, go Edit, Duplicate. Now I got 2. Let's change its position, and I'm just going to put it right there next to it. All right, there we go. So we got bar 1 and bar 2. Bar 1's on the left. Shoot, let's just change the parameters of bar 2 so visually it looks a little different. With bar 2 selected in my timeline, I can return to its solid settings, and let's just make it, I don't know, red. There we go. Okay. Parenting. Parenting allows us to make connections between layers. What if I want to have the movement of my red cube, my red bar, influence the movement of our red one? So the green one is going to influence the red one. I apologize for misspeaking. Yes, ma'am.
You go to where it says parent, none.
You got it. You got it. So if you don't see this column, and you should see a column here that says parent right there. If you don't see it, do me a favor. At the bottom of your layers palette, you have toggle switches and modes. Okay, that shouldn't, it should always be up. But I've noticed with After Effects that if you don't see parents, just hitting the button will kind of force it to go back. And if you still don't see it, if you still don't see this parent column, just right-click on the column headings, and you'll get some options here on which columns you want to see inside of your interface. Okay. Okay, so let's make some connections between the layers, because ultimately what I want here is that I want the ball 1 position to influence bar 2's, okay? This is a layer-based connection that we're making between these two different things. So check it out. I'm going to go into bar 2, the red one, and I want to connect it, make a relationship to its to the one immediately below. And she was absolutely right. This parent column will give you a list of all the layers that we can make connections within. So if I go bar 1, check it out. Now we've made a relationship between these two different layers. Transforming the parent, in this case the green bar, will have a direct impact on what happens to the red bar. So they're now joined. They're now connected to each other. Okay? So I can move it. Now all of the transform information from the green bar is influencing all of the transform information of the red bar. So if I was to rotate the green bar, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, the red one's going to rotate as well. It's a layer-to-layer relationship. All of the transform information from the green is going to be influencing the transform information of the red. So if I go in here and rotate it, you can see what it's doing. Okay? It's adopting the anchor point of our green and using that information to determine the rotation angle of our red. Okay? Now, the cool thing about these relationships is that the parent is always, always, always going to drive the entire transform of the child, right? In my mind, I always try to think of a funny little analogy to make it stick for me. And for me, this is like, a mom going into a shopping mall with her, her 4-year-old son or daughter, right? And the mom has the child by the hand, and wherever mom goes, the child goes too, right? However, at times, the child escapes from mom, right? And the child can run around the store independently from the parent, right? We get to control the parent, the green, but we also get to go in and control the red, the child. So check it out. I can still go in and rotate our child independently from our parent. I still get to move it independently from our parent. Oops, that was anchor point. Didn't want to do that. There we go. I can still move it independently from our parent. So we have two different hierarchies here of transformation. I can grab the parent and have the entire hierarchy adopt the transform, or I can go in and just move the child. Kind of make sense? That make sense? Okay. How do I turn off this relationship?
Go back to where it says parent.
Yep. Go back to where it says parent, and as one would imagine, none. Okay. Okay. One thing to note, this is not something that you can animate. Okay, so you can't animate this relationship activating and deactivating. It's either all on or it's all off, unfortunately. That's called dynamic parenting, and it's something that's just now starting to kind of pop up in our computer graphics technology, and we haven't quite adopted that yet here in the After Effects world.
Can one layer adopt more than one object?
Absolutely. So let's put a third one into the mix. Let's put I don't know. Let's just duplicate this layer once more, the bar, and let me just grab it. And just so we have a nice visual here, I'll change the solid settings of that third one to blue. There we go. And let's hook it all in. Now I'm going to parent my red guy back to my green. So now the green is driving the red in every sense. Let me show you another way for us to hook together all these parents. When you get into complex layers or complex compositions inside of After Effects, you may have 100 different layers that you have to manage, and it turns into an organizational nightmare. That little pull-down menu where it says parent can get rather long. Okay, and if you haven't done a good job, and if you haven't named all your layers like I've kind of am suggesting that you do, this can turn into your worst enemy. So let me show you the best friend that you have in this particular situation. It's called the tail whip, the pick whip, if you will. It's a little curly Q guy next to the parent menu. This is an interactive selector. So I can grab this one. I'm going to left click and drag this little click icon here, and I want to hover my mouse onto the layer that I wish to parent the blue one to. So I want to select bar 1. So it's an interactive selection system. Boop. So now I have 2 layers parented to bar 1. Okay, there we go. And now,
That would make bar 1 the child?
bar 1's the parent.
Oh,
Parent, yeah. And then 2 and 3, the red and the blue, are the children of the parent. So wherever the parent goes, the children are going to go along for the ride. However, if we select the child, we can edit them independently from the parent. One other thing, let's get a little bit more directed towards the homework assignment, or excuse me, the lab assignment that you're about to participate within. Okay? What if, instead of parenting bar 3 to the green guy, we parented bar 3 to the red guy, number 2? Let's see what happens. Now we're making a chain, a skeleton chain, if you will, of parent-child relationships within inside of our composition. I'm going to use the pick whip because it's kind of fun. I'm going to take my little blue guy and drag it on top of bar 2. Boom. There we go. So we got, I love, this is, we've now made a chain, right? And it works and behaves kind of like, the good old nursery rhyme. The head bone's connected to the neck bone's connected to anyone? No. So it's the same idea, right? So if we move the head, the shoulders don't necessarily move. But if we move the shoulders, the head is going to move, right? So I can still move bar 3 independently from the rest. However, if I grab the red one, look, now the red and the blue move. And if I grab the green one, since this is at the top of the hierarchy, everything's going to move. Okay? Something that you will see in action tonight with your homework assignment, or with your lab assignment with RoboTV. Pretty cool, huh? Parenting. It's a lot of fun. I find this extraordinarily applicable for motion graphics because I'm all about simplifying the design and the animation system to include a number of these elements because I have a mantra. And I'm almost to the point where I should print out my mantras because I have a number of them. Each class has their own mantra. Like if you take my 3D modeling class, my mantra is no flying spaceships. We don't do flying spaceships. Okay? For my animation... Huh? I say it all the time in my 3D modeling class. No flying spaceships. Okay? In my animation classes, I say mo keyframes, mo problems. Okay? The more keyframes that you have inside your animation, the more problems you're going to have. So this simplifies the entire system down into a hierarchy. Instead of animating all 3 independently, I can maybe just animate 1. Mo keyframes, mo problems. I've simplified my entire system into something that's manageable. Okay. All right. The last thing that I want to talk about tonight is involves some of the assets that we're going to be working with for RoboTV. Now, to a certain degree, I'm going to allow you guys to explore the content. This is going to hopefully challenge you on a number of different levels to construct this little animation. There are 2 things in here that we haven't discussed about yet: how to work with Illustrator files and how to work with Photoshop documents, and specifically layered Photoshop documents and layered Illustrator files. So let's check it out. We're going to start with the robobody.psd. Check it out. It's a Photoshop document. If I was to explore this in Photoshop, you'll very quickly find that it's constructed out of, I think, 4 different layers. There's the frame, and then the 3 portions of the arm, all on their separate layers. I want to preserve that, okay? It's really important that I be able to control and animate each one of these layers independently from the rest. So let's talk about the import procedure for layered Photoshop documents into After Effects. So I'm going to left-click and drag my Photoshop document into my bin, and we're going to get this little popover. Now the import kind option here is the most important thing that we need to look at. Just don't hit OK, because there's 3 choices in here that we have to honor and look at. The first one is footage. This is the default. If I hit footage, check out what it does. It's going to merge the layer. Or we can import just individual layers, which we don't want to do. It's going to merge it. It's going to flatten our document out. This is not the result that we want, right? Because here's my, let me get rid of my bars. Here's my Photoshop document, okay? And it is just a flattened image, okay? No layers. This is bad. Boo. Mission not accomplished because we've ruined all of our lovely Photoshop work. To get all of our layers into After Effects and to preserve that entire system, we have to change how we're importing this document into After Effects. Let me just trash it. Let's do it again. And robobody.psd. Now, I did it through the import dialog box instead of just dragging and dropping it, but the exact same interpret footage options are available to us. When working with Photoshop documents, you don't want to do footage unless you actually want to flatten your image, right? We have 2 options that we need to look at: composition and composition retain layer sizes. Let's explore the differences and the nuances between both of these because they have big impacts on how we're going to work. When we import our Photoshop documents as compositions, you're going to get probably what you'd expect to see. There we go. We'll keep editable layer styles on. There we go. And let's examine our bin. We imported this Photoshop document as a composition. So we get a folder with all of the layers. So under RoboBody Layers, here's all the individual layers. There they are. Ta-da! Fantastic. And we also get a composition that includes all of those layers already in it. So if I double-click on RoboBody Comp, there it is. And there's each one of my layers already set to go. I'm ready to start animating. However, we have a little bit of an issue here. Has anyone picked up on what the big issue is? Let's look at each one of these separately. And actually, to be honest with you, it may be invaluable. Let me just open up Photoshop real fast. so we can compare what we're seeing here in After Effects to what Photoshop has in its original Photoshop document. And geez, at this rate, we can just take a small little break while Photoshop loads. Has anyone else noticed that it seems to take forever for all of the CC apps to load? Man, it kind of drives me crazy. It used to be so fast. You hit the button, boom, and just bounce open. Now it's like, go get a cup of coffee, check the email for 5 minutes, and then you're ready to start working. If the guys at Adobe are listening to my live cast, please fix this. I really don't like that. It angers the Pat. Here we go. Okay. Or not. Here we go. All right. Let me open up that exact same Photoshop document. Ugh. Beach Ball of Doom. Silly Photoshop. Why must you take all of my RAM? Yeah. All right, here we go. Let me just grab RoboBody. FYI, Photoshop is a RAM hog, as is After Effects. So having both of them open at the same time is not good. Okay. Here we can actually see precisely how the original author of this Photoshop document has constructed their scene. Okay. And if you look closely, here we go. Each layer in Photoshop looking pretty great. Okay. Let me just kind of, let's do this. Let's solo the big arm and take a look at what we got here. Okay, so here's the layer. And if I transform it, just do Command-T, you can see what part of this layer has pixels within it. The actual size of the layer is relatively small. It's just slightly outside of the bounding box of the pixels that represent the arm, right? And most of that has to do with the drop shadow that's been applied to this layer, okay? So keep this visual in mind. The actual layer is just slightly larger than the arm itself. Let's go back into After Effects and examine precisely what the computer has done and how it's different. Okay, let me close Photoshop. It's just going to dominate everything. All right, so in Photoshop, when we import this document in as a composition, let's solo that exact same layer. Here it is. There's the big arm, okay? And if I click on big arm, what can you tell me about how After Effects has interpreted this layer? It's huge, right? After Effects is interpreting the entirety of the composition size as the bounding box for that layer, right? If I was to rotate this layer, I'm just going to hit the R key, or for rotate for that layer. Check it out, okay? You can see how big After Effects thinks that layer is. It is matching the height and width of the composition. This is bad. This is very bad, okay? This is usable, it's workable, we can still do this, but it definitely makes our lives a little bit more problematic. Let me show you the right way to do it, the alternative, which is definitely far superior to the other two options that we've explored. I'm going to get rid of RoboBody, and I'm going to delete all the assets that I've been currently working with. There we go. Yes, I'm sure. Let's delete them. And let's do that import procedure one last time. Now, the option that I endorse and I would encourage you to follow is retain layer style. Can't talk. It's the end of the night. Retain layer sizes. Now, After Effects is going to go in, analyze each layer of your Photoshop document, and create a layer that precisely matches the pixel density of what we're seeing over in Photoshop. So this is the only way to get direct parity between Photoshop and After Effects. There we go. We'll hit open. Editable styles, keep that on. Yes, there it is. And we'll double click on RoboBody. And this time, when we just turn everything off and look at RoboBody, yeah, look where the bounding box is now. It matches the precise location of the bounding box of the layer over in Photoshop. This is what we want. Rock and roll. Okay? Yeah?
So, what's the other, what was the other ones for? What's the only composition imports for? What kind of file?
I'm confused.
Why would you use the other composition?
I have no idea. I really don't. I've never used it. I've never used anything other than composition retain layer sizes, okay? But I think it's important that we know the differences. There may be a situation in your future when you want each layer to be the exact same size as the composition. So.
Does the same go for Illustrator files?
Exact same thing. So let's actually continue our conversation and talk about how we can import in those layered Photoshop or that layered Illustrator file. Because we have sports titles here, do the exact same thing. Composition, retain layer sizes. We'll import it in. And now we have another composition called sports titles, and there they all are. Now these are a little bit different. They were designed in Illustrator. So in Illustrator, the size of the layer doesn't necessarily match, right around the text, but it's still workable. Okay. Now here's kind of an interesting thing. If you look at the sample that we're going to be working to create this afternoon, we need all of these documents here, all of these elements, climbing through snowboarding, to exist in the exact same composition as all of my robot pieces, right? Give me some options here. How am I going to craft that? How am I going to get all of the sports titles things, all those sports titles layers, chilling with the RoboBody stuff? How are we going to do that? Any ideas? Keep in mind that everything in After Effects is layers based, right? We have 4 layers here that represent all of the text elements for our little animation. I need to combine those with all the robo pieces and all the other assets that we're going to use and create this assignment with, okay? Layer based, how do we get layers from one composition into layers or into another composition? Parenting, not going to work because they're in an entirely different composition. Think of them like Photoshop documents, right? You can. You can do what's called nesting. Compositions are also classified as a layer, believe it or not. So check it out. I'm going to go to RoboBody, and this is one of the 2 ways that you can do it. You can grab your sports titles guy, and then just drag it down into your comp, okay? And now we've nested an entire composition in another composition. I always think of compositions like fancy folders. In my mind, a comp is nothing more than a folder. It's a folder that has a very, very, very specific frame size, a very specific frame rate, and a very specific duration. We can combine these folders just like you can in other applications. Now, if I wanted to animate, let's say, the movement of snowboarding independent from the rest of the text elements, where would I need to go?
You would open up the layers folder and then drag those.
We don't have to go into the layers folder. We want to go into the composition, the sports titles composition, right? So anything that we make in the master composition, because remember, in RoboBody, we've put the entire composition into the RoboBody comp, right?
Okay, so you click on that.
Yeah, and then anything that I do in here will immediately be rippled updated to what's in RoboBody. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's go into sports titles, and I'll just do snowboarding as an example. Over the period of, I don't know, a second or so, I'll just have it move left, okay? So I want to hit the P key. P is in position to expose the position channel. I'll click on the stopwatch to set a keyframe. I'll move my playhead forward, and then I'll move my layer. I get my little motion path. Now I have fundamentally animated a layer within inside of sports titles. But since I have nested the entire sports title composition inside the RoboBody composition, that animation is also retained. Okay? So think of compositions like folders. Now if you don't want to work with folders, if we're over-engineering it for your mind, that's fine. We can also just copy and paste layers from one comp into another comp. Okay? Check it out. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I want to get rid of the sports titles composition from RoboBody. Hit the delete key. And now in my sports titles comp, I haven't deleted the layers. I'm just going to copy them. Do edit, copy, go to RoboBody, and put my playhead at the beginning of the animation, and do edit, paste. And all of them are going to come in. It's a great way for us to work. Okay. Other questions? We're going to continue to explore this idea of nesting in comps within comps over the next couple of weeks. So if this felt kind of weird and uncomfortable, don't worry about it. We're going to talk a lot about it next week as we begin to explore more complex animation in a fun little assignment that's going to allow you to animate about 80 layers. Well, maybe not 80, but much more than what we've done so far.
Is it similar to like Photoshop or grouping?
It's identical. It's identical. Yeah. I tell people, and I mentioned this before, just think of compositions like folders. That's all they are. That's all they are. All of our layers can be in one folder, or we can organize them into a whole series of folders and then combine them together into the one master one. Okay, other questions about parenting and working with these Photoshop and Illustrator documents? Okay, let's just go back to renderography real quick and revisit the expectations for both the homework and the lab this week. And then I'll let you guys get started with them. Okay, so the homework this week is going to come directly out of the book. It's called DJ Master. It's worth 50 points. It's due by the beginning of the next class. This is what we're striving to complete. It's relatively simple. It's got some video elements in there, and these are all shape layers in the background that you're going to create and then subsequently animate. It's going to be a pretty fun one. It's going to be pretty easy. You should be able to knock it out of the park without too much issue. If you have any questions, you definitely know where to find me. Please make sure that at the conclusion of this homework assignment that you're honoring the naming conventions that I've established down here at the bottom of the assignment sheet. It definitely makes it a whole lot easier for me to grade these things kind of quickly if you follow the naming convention. Think of these like your assignments. These are, English papers. If you don't put your name on your English paper, you're not going to get any points for it. So at the very least, if you choose to ignore the rest of the naming conventions, put your name on it. So at the very least, I can give you some points. Okay. With all of our assignments, you're going to submit the After Effects project file and a rendered QuickTime movie of it. Okay? Questions on what we're going to be doing for our homework? Should be pretty quick. You should be able to bang it out pretty quickly. Okay? Now your lab, this is the one where you're going to get a little bit more, where it's going to get a little bit more complex. Let's go over to our lab. I provided you with a sample image that I'm looking for you guys to build. Let's just play it real fast. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to mention, and I apologize because I had my sound turned off. There's a sound effect that goes along with this. Let me plug in the sound. This is going to be really, really loud, so brace yourselves. All right, interesting challenge, because now we have a sound effect file that we have to animate too. In the motion graphics community, it's very, very often that we interface with a sound effects designer or a musician that's going to be making our score. We often have to animate our stuff to an existing soundtrack. It very rarely goes the other way around. Okay, so we need to incorporate this sound effect and then animate to the audible music cues. So let's just talk real fast how we can do that. And it's relatively easy, but it's not exactly as... Huh? Absolutely. Let me import in that sound effects file real fast. It's pretty easy. There it is, Robo Music. We'll hit open. And it's just going to be an audio file, importing selected items. There we go. And let's throw it into our comp. You can put audio files anywhere within inside your composition as you want. Historically, I always put them at the bottom, but put them wherever it makes sense to you. There's no visual element associated with an audio file, so it shouldn't be much of an issue. So let me do this. I'm going to grab my work area indicator bar and shorten it to precisely match the duration of my audio file, or as close to it. All right. The space bar. Why no music? Interesting. Get the space bar, get a RAM preview of your entire work area, right? We're not hearing any of the audio, and this is usually where the frustration begins. And I get a lot of hurried phone calls, at the 11th hour as people run into this problem. The indicator icon's on, right? Everything visually tells you that you should be hearing music right now, but we're not. And this is the stupidness of After Effects. I really hate this. This drives me absolutely crazy, okay? It's its age showing, or it's the application showing its age. Let me show you what you have to do. You have to do a full-blown RAM preview. If you go over to the preview menu over here, it's this button, okay? That last button, RAM preview. Once you do that, the computer is going to go through and evaluate every frame inside of your work area. And then after the evaluation, it's going to play. Here it goes. Just thinking about it, maybe. Here we go. Oh, I hit stop on accident. Let me try again. All right. There you go. So once it goes through and evaluates all those frames, then you'll hear it. And it's going to loop it. So how do we get some sort of visual indicator as to when all these sound effect cues happen? Because it would be great if we could have something within our timeline that gives us a visual as to when things are going to need to animate. Since we don't always get audio playback, these markers are an important part of our production pipeline. Let me show you how to insert them. They're really, really easy, but it's kind of a little mystery if you don't know the keyboard shortcut. We have two different ways that we can insert in our markers to get a visual for when all of these things are going to happen. All right. So I'm just going to turn this down a bit so I can hear myself think. There we go. All right. I want to stop my playback and just dock my playhead back at the beginning. For us, what we have to do is that we have to hit the multiplication key on your number pad. Okay? Multiplication key on your number pad. So this guy. Multiplication key on your number pad. That's going to allow you to interactively place a marker whenever you hit that key, okay, while the playback is happening. Now, if you're on a laptop where you don't have a number pad, I think it's like Shift 8, I think, is the multiplication key. Yeah, Shift 8, and that should do the exact same function. So let me show you the pipeline that I would suggest that you would follow for this part. And it requires you to be kind of Johnny on the spot, using your ears. Whenever you hear one of the sound effect cues, hit the multiplication key, okay? Now, what we're doing is we're just trying to get close, okay? We're trying to get it close, and then we can go back and refine it over our subsequent edits. So let's just do it. I'm going to hit the RAM preview button, and I'm going to let it go through once, okay? So I'm preparing myself now. Got my Shift key held down. Oops. Hold on a sec. Why didn't Shift 8 work? No, it did. It worked. Now I'm on a laptop, which function. Nope. Why is it stopping my playback? It is placing the marker for me, but it's stopping all of my playback too. So let's try this. I'm going to hit undo for a second. And I want to select my layer specifically. And let's try it like that for me on my laptop, since it's choosing not to cooperate at the moment. No, it's just going to stop every single time. Grr. Make sure it's not. Aha. Yeah, this is going to drive me crazy. So I don't know if this is just my laptop keyboard getting in the way or what's going on. For those of you that are following along, is it working for you by hitting that little multiplication key?
It works on the keypad, it doesn't work.
All right, I got to see why that is doing that. That is a change. It used to work pretty seamlessly. Maybe it's just 8 instead of Shift 8. No, it's always going to stop the playback, which is rather frustrating. I think I may have just figured it out. No, darn it. I was hoping that would be what it is. Don't want to mute the audio. Well, either way, hitting the Shift 8, the multiplication key, is going to put a marker in one of two places on your timeline. I'll continue to see if I can figure out why it's no longer doing what it's supposed to be doing. But just as a kind of a point of comparison, if you don't have anything selected on your timeline, that marker is going to be placed in this top gray bar in what's called the work area. If you have one of your layers selected, like your audio file, hitting Shift 8 or the multiplication key is going to put that marker, well, it's going to change the marker now. Hello, you should be getting a marker down here, dude. There we go. Maybe it's Control 8. Control 8 will put a marker on the layer itself. With that, huh? Markers are just markers. They're just visual indicators of a moment in time. Oh. Yeah, Vincent, hit me. Is there a way to see the audio waves and where to track it that way? There is. If you expand the audio file, there's an audio channel and waveform. If I can click on it, there we go. There it is. If you can decode that and figure out where all the sound effects are, do it. Yes, sir.
What about making the entire audio into keyframes with the tool that the After Effects uses?
Say that again?
If you go to control click the layer of the audio and then choose keyframe assistance and convert the keyframes to audio keyframes.
Keyframe assistant, convert audio to keyframes. I've never done that before. This is not what we want to do.
You want some motion to follow the audio, right?
No, what we're doing here is that what we're doing is that we're just trying to generate markers so that we have a visualization as to when those robot arms need to move.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all we're trying to accomplish.
Doesn't the keyframes automatically do that for you?
No.
I learned that because I tried to get a head start on this week's assignment because it's Friday and Monday we won't be here. And so an extra credit portion of our homework assignment, they had us do that with a square background.
Yep.
And so like this whole square background moved to the DJ music.
It is very cool. And what you're doing there is that you're taking the audio file and you are generating movement of a layer based on the amplitude of the frequency of that waveform. We're not trying to do that because I want to do custom rotation through keyframes to the robot arm.
Okay.
Yeah, so the method that you're doing here isn't going to yield us the result that we're after because I need to be able to control precisely how that robot arm is going to move. Okay, so let's try it one more time. Okay. So it is working. It is working very differently than it has in the past, but I have figured it out. Let me go back and hit undo a number of steps. Okay. I remember this from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but this is one of the kind of weird things. They've changed the keyboard shortcut on me. It used to be Shift 8 to do multiplications. Now it's Control 8 if you don't have a number pad. You'll get the exact same function if you're doing it with the number pad, hitting the multiplication key. And let me show you the conundrum that we're in, and it's rather frustrating. I don't have anything selected inside of my layers palette, so all of my markers are going to be placed right there. If I fire off a RAM preview, it's going to go through once. Okay. Now I'm going to listen the next time around. Oops, it's ping-ponging. Sorry. That's what happens when I start playing. There we go. Now it's going to loop. Okay, here we go. There we go. Cool. And every time I hit Control 8, it was placing it up there. So mission accomplished. One other thing. Now, this is the stupidness of After Effects. Question? You guys look like you're confused. Computer started over. I apologize. I thought you were changing machines. Okay. If you have a layer selected, and this drives me absolutely crazy about After Effects, but it is what it is, right? If you have a layer selected and you do the exact same thing, okay, I'll let it go through once, and then I'm going to start clicking here. Okay, I'm pressing keys now whenever I hear something. Do I see any markers on the layer? It's only when I stop the playback do all those markers show up on the layer itself. Kind of silly, but it is what it is. Okay? So my suggestion to you, don't have anything selected when you're putting these interactive markers in when you're listening to the soundtrack. Because now I have a really good approximation as to when I need to rotate all of my arms, my robot arms, to get to match the movement to the audio. Okay? One other thing about these markers, you can delete your markers pretty easily. You can right-click on them, you delete this marker, delete all markers, you can lock them. Markers are a pretty neat system across all the Adobe apps. Doesn't matter if you're in Premiere or Encore or Audition or here in After Effects. They play a much larger role inside of a television pipeline. So you can name your markers if you want. You can say this is rad, then hit OK, and then it will show up as a little tag down here on the layer. I've seen people do this as a way to communicate notes to people within their animation all the time. You can actually use that comment section to put on a marker. A couple other ways you can delete markers. You can, of course, right-click and delete this marker. If you grab it and just drag it all the way to the right of your timeline until your cursor is off the timeline, it should delete it. Yep, well, let me zoom out, excuse me. There we go. Over there, now they're gone. Or you just delete them, right-click on them, and then delete. Yeah, because it's undo. That's not. Yeah, you can also move them around. I forgot to mention that. So they're not set in stone. You can definitely go snag them and move them around. So if you're off by, a microsecond and you still want to use the markers as an indicator as to where to place all your keyframes, you can just move them and you're on your way.
This kind of sucks that when you do the Command Z,
It doesn't get.
it all out.
It's all, yeah. Just going back one step. Yeah, because I guess and I think what it's doing is that it's viewing this as one step. The insertion of markers is one step. Yeah. Yeah. If Adobe is listening, they should, in my opinion, they've gotten to the point with After Effects where they really need to rewrite the entire app and modernize it, because there's a lot of things that, are not good. The way, and I say this all the time to people, After Effects does not do audio, like at all. What you've seen is the extent of what I would do with audio in After Effects. It's horrible. It handles audio horribly, and I mean horribly. It's in the early days of After Effects, it's still there. There are actually audio effects that you can apply to your audio tracks, but it does it so poorly, it's like, why would you even bother when you have dedicated audio apps whose sole focus is to change the way your audio sounds? Yeah. Just because you can hammer a nail with your shoe doesn't mean you should do it, Just because you can change the effect of your audio in After Effects doesn't mean you should do it. Okay. Questions? Everyone good? Everyone kind of understand? Sure, absolutely. Let me delete all my markers, and I'll just do it real fast. Okay, so my suggestion to you, as you do this, just make sure nothing's selected in your layers palette. That way you'll see the markers the moment they're created. Okay, so I'm going to start my RAM preview. This guy right here, RAM preview. Now, if you have a number pad, it's the multiplication key on your number pad. And if you're on a laptop or you don't have a number pad, you got to hold Control 8. And in CS6, I'm like almost 100% sure it was Shift 8 instead of Control 8 here in CC. So let's go ahead and start it. I'll start it. You can hear it playing now. I'm going to wait until it loops back in. Now I'm going to start hitting Control 8, and every time I hit it, you can see a marker is generated on my timeline. Okay?
Which button is that?
The Control key?
Oh.
Yeah, the one that says Control. Control 8. You don't have to insert them manually.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like so Control 8 is just showing the marker. So the place is
Let's see what you're talking about.
we have to do it manually.
What do you mean?
Like Control 8 is showing the marker, right? So
Yeah,
I have to listen in the music and then do it.
Insert the marker.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, manually. Okay.
Manually insert it. Yeah, it's not automatically going to make markers for you, right? You're in the driver's seat as to where these markers are created. And remember, the sole purpose of these markers is just to have a visual representation as to when something happens in the audio. Because we want to match the rotation of our robot arms to the corresponding sound effect on the audio clip. Okay.
How we delete the markers?
Right-click on it. Delete marker. If you wanted to manually insert a marker without using any of these keyboard shortcuts, you can't do it while it's playing back, but check it out. This is the marker button. You can left click and drag and place a marker wherever you want on your timeline. So another way to add markers. Okay.
Just to place
You still have to go in and animate. Yeah, it's all it is just a visual representation in time. That's all it is. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make the process of animating this any easier. It just makes it go a little bit faster in correspondence or in conjunction with the audio file. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay, hit me.
Yeah, about the old fonts that, well, how can I like using, so how can I change to this, the Photoshop fonts? Is it Photoshop or Illustrator?
Those are Illustrator, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so how can I change to the editable layer? I went to the
You'd have-
layer and then but it won't let me. How can I?
You have to go open an Illustrator.
Oh really?
Yeah. To change the Illustrator file, you'd have to go open that file in Illustrator, make your changes. Yeah. Okay, other questions? All right, this is a challenge. This is absolutely going to be a brain challenge for you guys as you figure this next part out. So let's just get to work. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to help you out. I'll walk around and make sure everyone knows what they're doing. Let me stop the live stream, and I'll come give you a hand.